Hi everyone, my name is Sabrina, but you may also know me as LadyGladia in this fandom and basically everywhere else. I am a long-time fandom-related person. I love to dive into a passion as much as possible, but I am also curious and prone to observing human beings, so I tend to analyze everything to understand how things work. This is why I decided to try this sort of very dangerous experiment of discussing what doesn't work in the Good Omens fandom and what we all should try to do to avoid basic mistakes. What I'm going to state is, of course, my personal opinion. I am not here to tell you I own the knowledge and you should follow my advice. These are my observations. They are biased by my past experiences, the way I filter information, how I approach both socials and social dynamics. Most importantly, what I'm going to observe and state refers to events and dynamics that belong outside the convention. I need to remember to everyone that the ineffable con has a code of conduct that has to be followed without exception. On my behalf, apart from being in a fandom from the past 30 years, I have also an academic knowledge of some of the topics I am going to analyze. I took a uni degree focused on journalism and the new media, and my thesis was a study about the implication related to gender gap and the use of the internet with a specific observation of the different way gender approach frames in fandom dynamics. That sure will help me with the discussion of social media theories. I also develop quite the objective eye when it comes to dealing with famous people due to my 10 plus years as a journalist in the entertainment. I had my fair share of press conferences, interview, festivals, and had the chance to see very popular figures in a very familiar environment, or simply to interact more deeply than a fan could usually do. So I learned how to separate the popular persona from the actual human being. Despite that, I haven't lost my fascination for the magic of media, the love for the people that create art through their words, their acting, their drawing, etc. I hope my resume is valid enough to give me some credit as a person capable of handling the topic I want to discuss. Also, as you might have probably noticed, I am reading the speech for various reasons. My English is not super bad, but the topic is very delicate, so I didn't want to risk a misunderstanding caused by my lack of grammar skills. I also tend to lose myself a lot while talking, and this panel needs to be 50 minutes long, not 50 hours. Perhaps I should have tried to hide the fact that I'm reading, but I tried in the past and I'm very bad at it, so cards on the table. I wrote this, someone helped me check the grammar, etc. So, despite the appearances, this is an almost like a real face-to-face speech, just without me forgetting things and start to share local recipes. Though, if you need some, I'm always happy to help. I will also be available after the panel in a Zoom chat, so you can come and ask me questions, wave your hands, insult me, whatever. I will be very happy to explain further my vision of fandom and whatever related to it. So please don't be shy, I don't bite, usually. I was planning to go through a sort of discourse led by a bullet list of examples I gathered in the past year or so, and then save the answers to my form as the last bit. What people decided to write to me made me change my plans, and I will merge the various topics with them. About the questions I'm going to read, let me point out a couple of very important remarks. I had to cut some of them to respect the privacy of the people involved in the events. In my form, I asked to share an unpleasant experience that happened to you or to our close friend in the Good Omens fandom, or if you ever felt gaslighted or simply not allowed safe to share some opinions about a topic that you found concerning. Some of the answers I received were very specific, and because of the basic essence of fandom, I know many of you would try to speculate, investigate about the characters involved. Please don't do that. Or if you have, don't do it in a public space, like Facebook and Twitter. Don't drag random people into unnecessary drama. Don't indulge in the wrong side of curiosity, because we are going to explore how to be better, not fueling arguments and breakage. I'm going to be very annoying and repeat this during the panel. Let's start with something that has been pointed out many times and is part of the core that allows a fandom to exist, but also to deteriorate. Parasocial interaction. Wikipedia defines it as a kind of psychological relationship experienced by an audience in their mediated encounters with performers in the mass media, particularly on television. Viewers or listeners come to consider media personalities as friends, despite having no or limited interaction with them. Parasocial interaction is described as an illusionary experience, such that media audiences interact with personas, celebrities, fictional characters, social media influencers, as if they are engaged in a reciprocal relationship with them. The term was coined by Donald Orton and Richard Wall in 1956. If you ever wondered why you became so attached to a popular people from the media, or why your emotional investment with a character from a show is so deep, well, this is it. The larger part of the audience live a degree of parasocial interaction. It could be as simple as commenting out loud to the anchorman reading a news, or screaming, "He's behind you!" while watching an horror movie, to something deeper that involves real and articulate feelings that could turn in what has been defined as parasocial relationship. That, going back to Wikipedia, is an exposure that garners interest in a persona, becomes a parasocial relationship after repeated exposure to the media persona, causes the media user to develop illusions of intimacy, friendship, and identification. Positive information learned about the media persona results in increased attraction, and the relationship progresses. Parasocial relationships are enhanced due to trust and self-disclosure provided by the media persona. Media users are loyal and feel directly connected to the persona, much as they are connected to their close friends, by observing and interpreting their appearance, gestures, voice, conversation, and conduct. Media personas have a significant amount of influence over media users, positive or negative, informing the way that they perceive certain topics or even their purchasing habits. This kind of mechanism has been very much exacerbated since the advent of socials, that allows a faster, closer, and deeper interaction between the audience and the people we admire the most. Now, I promise my little social studies lecture is almost over, but it's very important to keep in mind that this, because it explains a lot of what we can go wrong in a fandom. You must keep in mind that that what I just explained happens to almost every person inside a fandom. That is part of our emotional survival skills, and also a coping mechanism, an escapism that could be good and also very, very bad. A quick example, John Lennon's death. In addition, I would like everyone to keep in mind, in case you start to believe that you are doing something wrong, that is not your fault. That your attachment to a popular persona, especially in this moment of time, is also led by our mental state, and how much and in what terms this persona decide to interact with their fans. And before anyone starts to think that I'm going to blame someone, no, I am not. Almost no one has been taught how to use social media, and it is not an easy task. People that work with them and studied them professionally are capable of handling all the nuances, and that is why press office exists and why many artists decide to use them to interact with the audience. In this fandom, the larger part of the people involved use social by their own. That could lead to a lot of fun, witty answers, personal interaction, and more positive stuff. But it also could deeper in our feelings, turning our parasocial interaction and relationships in something that could appear too real, boosting a cascade of reaction that could end in some very twisted behaviors. I know. You are thinking, we are not like that. We are good. They are good. We are very good and positive fandom. True, also not. Because we are a vast group of people that comes from different cultures, grew up developing bias, living among very different experiences, and even if we all speak English, it doesn't mean we share similar existence. These diversities will suggest to proceed with caution, to avoid preconception, and never judge someone that is interacting with us using limited parameters. About the popular persona we interact with, we should make the effort to separate our parasocial feelings and how we perceive someone through the media from what is in fact real, offline, tangible. We are not friends with these people, even if they answer all of our questions on Twitter. We have no idea what is happening in their life and why they decided to interact in a certain way or not. I mean, my online friends doesn't know what happened in my life because I select what I want to disclose and what not. I am not popular at all. So during the next 40 minutes, let's keep in mind that we are all human beings with skills and flaws, popular or not. Said that, let's pop into the first question. I wanted to say I am actually really nervous about this panel. I don't understand how complaints, legit or otherwise, being vented will help create a better fandom. This feels like a way to create drama within a fandom rather than assuage it. So, I understand your concerns, but this mindset is one of the reasons I asked for this panel. I am not here to vent, but to discuss. This doesn't have to be an argument, but to keep a fandom healthy, you need to talk about things from time to time. It is impossible to always agree, especially when there are so many people involved. We need to compromise, to step up if something bothers us, and also to step back if it is necessary to reach a better outcome. This doesn't mean we should be silent or avoid questions because we are afraid to create drama. Sometimes drama helps, allows people to realize that they are where they are, to change what they think, for the good or for the bad. And it is the only way to grow into something more complex and healthy. People will be lost in the process, but maybe for the best. Like someone said to me when I expressed my anxiety about this panel and the risk I'm taking, if someone decides to block me because of what I think, probably it is for the better. We can't go along forever or altogether, and discussion is fundamental to functional relationship. And fandom is a sort of a massive family, and we know that a lot of families could be very dysfunctional. And even when people love each other, it seems that you are afraid to be excluded if you don't acknowledge your fellow fans, and please don't be. Hiding a problem will not help to solve it. It will just let it become bigger and harder to handle. Piling up bad feeling is never a clever way to avoid a problem, but a straight one to exacerbate them and fall into arguments that could have been solved more easily. Another person decided to point at a specific event that happened at the early stage of the new era of Good Omens Fandom. They wrote, "The way an author was harassed was appalling beyond words. They was a sweet, kind, funny, friendly person, just sharing their work, and had a campaign of harassment launched against them. It affected their mental health, and they had to leave the fandom to find any peace. The fact that the fandom tolerates behavior like this is repulsive, and everyone who was cruel should be ashamed for the rest of their lives." To the person that sent me this answer, I beg you not to disclose in chat or any other public fashion the name of the person involved. They, as you pointed out, had suffered enough, and having people searching for them could be unhealthy. I remember very well when the events about this person happened, and I found myself speechless, knowing that people really hunted them on every social, sending abusive and threatening messages. I read about what was happening on Facebook group and asked some friends that had bigger knowledge about the fact what was happening, but them as well didn't know very much. From the point where I stood at the time, I had the impression that many fans were on their side, but apparently not so many stood out publicly for him. This could be not a sign that people didn't care for real, but it could be linked to another big problem that came with social media, especially when we subscribe to many of them. We usually have a different approach to each platform, have preferences among them, and use some more profuse than another. One person can find themselves abandoned in the place where the drama is happening, and at the same time be sternly defended on another platform. Being involved in an issue, but only as a general topic of a conversation, maybe to avoid the aforementioned drama, doesn't help the people that are living the drama. Since then, I heard of other cases of harassment and ostracism in the original fan work area. A friend of mine got involved in one of them and ended up blocked by many people for no reason, just because rumor has it, and people had them blocked without bothering to check. I can understand this behavior, because some author and artist can face some royal shit, and the decision to block an alleged problematic person could look like a way to cut issues before they even start. At the same time, this could deeply hurt the person involved. I'm going to say this now and repeat it again and again. We are human beings and we all have flaws. We have bad days. We sometimes write a comment without thinking. Fandom is our way to express love and passion for something or someone, and the emotional investment could cross a mental or an emotional state that came from something else that happened in our lives and that could lead to rude comments or strange behaviors. This is why asking what is wrong, asking for clarification and discussing things in an open-minded mindset would be the most ideal attitude. I'm sure we will return to that. I want to add a little personal thought about the entire relationship that exists between fanfiction authors and readers. Right now, it seems that the rule when you read a fic is, I wrote it for free, say something nice, or leave. Although requirements are something one absolutely should avoid, rejecting any time a not a praise comment is not constructive for either reader or writer. Some people are prone to analyze what they have read, which is part of the way they enjoy a work of fiction. But if any comment that is not a compliment is a trigger for your ability to keep writing, and I understand that some people have real issue dealing with it, discarding someone with alleged doubt or accuse them to have drawn all your inspiration tends to be a bit of a gaslight. Trying to be outspoken and tell in the note that you don't want such comment could be the solution, so people can avoid bothering you and be called out for something they didn't intend as rude or negative. Authors don't ask for money, but they often state they appreciate kudos and comments. And in an exchange of any kind, if I invested the time to read your work, that should leave open the option to say, it's not to my taste. Although there is clearly a need to be polite when doing so. Blocking any kind of discussion personally turns off my will to leave any comment, because I felt like my opinions is not valid nor acceptable. So why should I leave any kind of comment if I can't be honest about what I think about the work itself? Again, this is just my opinion and how I feel about the topic. Let's go further, and I'm reading to answer in a row. First, I don't know if it's going to be relevant. Spoiler alert, it is. But I feel like I can't express myself as much as I used to. And here I'm talking about fandom related stuff. There seems to be more louder voices, popular people, and it makes me feel like there's no point in me sharing my thoughts, because it will be overlooked anyway. I've also noticed that some people have it easy making passive-aggressive comments. The fandom doesn't really feel as welcoming and accepting as it used to be, at least from my point of view. while another person said, I have to kind of censor myself out of fear of being on the receiving end of passive-aggressive comments or rejected. It feels like there is less and less acceptance and more judgment. I find it toxic. I would say that now we have the cat out of the bag. Let's see if we can unfold this properly. I noticed in my many years in set fandoms that the attempt to keep a forced state of peace could lead, in the long run, to an opposite outcome. An undeniable truth is that despite being social animals, we are not fit to like everyone other single person we cross in our lives. And even if we have something in common, this doesn't mean we agree on everything. It looks like I'm saying something very obvious, but it is not, especially due to the new interaction dynamics given by socials. I need to explore a bit of social studies again. Even before the internet, there was a thing. Even before the internet was a thing, Erving Goffman described a behavior related to the introduction of our own self as personal branding, as the way we choose to appear to others, that usually avoids showing our bad side and gives a personal, flawless image, purged, polite, and socially acceptable. More than often, online interaction tends to lead people towards an exacerbation of this pleasant appearance, or to the exact opposite, as a very aggressive behavior that became more and more common thanks to the lack of actual tangible human being to interact with, the distances that separate us, and the perception of the safe, because we are in our home and not in the middle of the street. Because of that, a strong etiquette has been introduced in many public online spaces, group chat rooms, enlarged communities, etc. That is useful on one side, but could be defective on the other. It seems a bit of a paradox, but it is the same mechanism that allows democracies to work. You do what the majority decide, but then you are going to have an unhappy minority who is not necessarily wrong or bad. It is just a minority. Strong rules of behavior also try to compensate for this lack of consideration for a part of the community itself, but it's not possible to make everyone happy and satisfied. Also, some members could take advantage of the rules due to their skills, be more loud or outspoken, be popular for whatever reason, be kind but manipulative, and this will end with some people feeling excluded, unheard, or even mistreated. The experiences these two people share with us are not so uncommon, but as both of them pointed out, as the first answer Eric demonstrated perfectly, many are afraid of drama because they don't want to be rejected and to end up victims of a strong passive-aggressive behavior. I need to make a confession. I'm not a huge fan of politeness. From my point of view, being kind is a thing. Being polite is something very far away from kindness. I realized this huge difference thanks to one of the things I think we all should consider the most during our interaction, the cultural gap. Where I was born and raised, and I still live. One of the adjectives used to describe my fellow citizens is veracious, or genuine if you prefer. That doesn't mean we are, neither am I, always truthful. But we have in common the habit of speaking from our guts, be quite crude, even in the language, and very, very honest. Traveling, especially to England, and talking to friends that live or work abroad, confirmed to me that for the average English person, we are kind of rude. On my side, I perceive English people as over-mannered, almost false, and not very easy to disclose. This is of course a bias, mostly wrong, and something I had to learn to deal with, to understand and to accept, avoiding preconcepts that are partially still in place despite all my effort. But even if now I don't think the English people are constantly hiding something, I still find the politeness quite unnerving because it could be a very effective coping mechanism to force people into a quiet state. This is because if you react too loudly to a polite comment, you are making unnecessary drama. It can be also used to hide a passive-aggressive state, again, without the risk of being called out because, hey, I was being polite. Yeah, well, no, folks, let me tell you, you are quite transparent when you do that, and people avoid replying mostly out of fear of being attacked. Breaking news, not everyone is capable of being polite like those who grew up doing that, and it is also something difficult to achieve if English is not your first language. Many people in fandom are conscious of being in a higher position because they can use words more properly. Being fluent in a second or a third language or understanding it very well doesn't mean that one master all the nuances of it. So please use your language skills to be kind, not passive-aggressive, and to hide a knife behind a smile. This attitude is also very childish, as well as rude and offensive. I know, it is difficult. We all have our petty days, and you know, it is fine. We sometimes need to be like that. Just don't assume it as a standard way to interact with people. Another important aspect is that being in a community, being mutuals on Twitter, having an exchange of messages or any kind of relationship, despite a good way for bonding and make new and unexpected friends, and I'm speaking from personal experience, should not imply that we should throw ourselves in a blind defense of someone or something because a person that is not in our inner circle disagree with them. Of course, if someone is openly offending someone else, you have all the right to get mad at them. But what I witnessed so many times is that any kind of different opinion could enter into a reckless personal attack that involves a large number of people that have nothing to do with the issue itself. This is a huge problem in fandom in general. I've honestly been part of the problem as well. And I know that it's not an easy task to be objective, but we all should try. Because this episode, on the long run, end up with people feeling uncomfortable to participate in general discussion, isolated, afraid to be attacked, and they will eventually leave. This is something we could prevent with a minimum effort, and would avoid hurting other human beings, make them feel wrong, unworthy, and force them to abandon something they used to enjoy a lot. Think about it when you see someone get attacked because there's something you could happen to you in the next future. Do you want a real inclusive fandom, or you just want to hang around with people you like and say that you are part of the gang? Again, we always should remember that we can all do something wrong, that nobody's flawless, and second chance and forgiveness used with caution are always a better option than antagonizing or ignoring people. Also, if you see someone attacked by multiple people and you think the person didn't deserve to be torn apart, don't stay silent out of fear. Find a way to step in and work as a pacifier. Ignoring a problem is often worse than creating one. We should help each other, not play a let's see who survives. Let's jump to another very important subject. Queerness is a very major topic in the Good Omens fandom, and for very valid reason. As clearly stated by Neil Gaiman and most of the cast, the show is a love story. Has been intended like that from the start and implied a romantic involvement between two supernatural entities that appear shaped as men for most of the time, but that are by definition genderless, because angel and stuff technically have no such thing. The most recognized and popular codification is a non-binary asexual romance, but Neil himself said people can see them the way they prefer because they are not human. The entire situation had some very wholesome and some very hateful outcomes, with the entire group ending up leaving some space because what they consider canon must be accepted as the only truth, and if you don't think the same, you are phobic. Someone left an answer about interaction regarding headcanon. More specifically, it was about how the audience perceived the sexual orientation and the gender identities of Aziraphale and Crowley, and how that affected some public discussion that ended up not very well. If you have found yourself involved in some of them, if you are just curious, please remember my request to avoid speculation and to start rumors, because none of us, especially me, wants to wake up tomorrow morning having started a drama or an harassment against someone. I'm going to keep the last part of what the person wrote me because I think their message is really on point. Headcanons are very important to people, but they shouldn't be seen as license to abuse others. Whether someone in LGBTQ plus cis, het, a casual fan, or has written an article about how Good Omens helped them to come to terms with their own gender sexuality, the underlying message of Good Omens is love wins. But some people act as though only their definition of love is allowed to win, and they will abuse people who don't bend to them. I would like to unfold something about perception of sex and romance that I have myself realized quite recently. I am an heterosexual cis woman, and at the same time I am somehow part of the queer community for being demisexual, panromantic, and on the ace spectrum. I spent more than 25 years trying to understand why I wasn't able to share my friends and others' ability to find attractive people just from their appearance. Funny to say, my mom, who is not at all an expert in sexual orientation, used to tell people that ask me if I like someone, she doesn't know. She likes people for what they have in their heads. And I think it's a pretty nice definition of someone with my orientation. Anyway, I discovered what a demisexual is around 7 years ago, and it was a total epiphany. Before that, and still now to be honest, I always try to explain to my allosexual friends that showing me half-naked men was pointless, but they fail to remember most of the time, and so my favorite line is, if you say it so. Why I'm telling you that? To point out how much different could be the perception of something linked to attraction and romance. I think that finding someone attractive because of how this person looks is crazy, totally unrelatable, but I don't go around calling perverts my friends because of that. Another thing I am mostly incapable of doing is to ship a non-canonical couple. Basically, if an author didn't push some real sexual tension between two characters, I don't see them as a couple. But as before, I don't go around and tell people that they can't enjoy a ship. My perception is mine, and is guided by many factors: my genders, my orientation, my preference, even my experience in relationships. Everything piles up into what we see or don't see inside a story, and from this standing point, nothing is right or wrong. I understand very well how much the representation of some specific headcanon or queer love is important for the community, but at the same time, cis and heterosexual person can't be accused of cancelling something or being phobic because they don't see romance between Aziraphale and Crowley, but maybe just a platonic friendship. Love is love, and it's true. The final message in Good Omens is that the love wins everything, and for some people, and I am of them, a strong friendship has the same amount of love as a romantic relationship minus the sex. I saw the friendship reading the Good Omens novel, and the ace romantic relationship in the TV show. About their gender identities, I didn't saw anything, cause they are not human, but I also enjoyed reading fanfiction with sex involved, cause they represent another stage in my mind that is separate from the previous two. So, of course, I'm not here to tell the LGBT plus community to let this very precious and rare media representation they have to the heterosexual to turn it into a basic dynamic friend duo type of story. But also, do not get mad at people that are not able to see the same story you see. Even if it looks so clear to you, for someone else it isn't. World is changing. People are discovering stuff late in their lives. They are not only learning something new, they are discarding all the things they knew and replace the information with something that is in constant change, and that sometimes goes against what the society and their families and friends taught them for years. We need to be patient, and I know that queer community has been patient for centuries. I am myself exhausted to tell people not to point half-naked men at me, and it's not this much to tolerate, but I get the frustration. It is unfair, a bit understandable, to call all to cast all cheese-set people as evil. We all require knowledge and experience and education. We all need guidance in some form or another. A person asking questions is way better than someone who dwells in their prejudice. I hope no one took offense from my words. If so, you are free to come and tell me in chat or Zoom. After the panel, I will be available, also on Twitter, if you see this panel after the con. Again, I would remind you of the Convention Code of Conduct, which I am also part of, and hope that we can all stay accountable to this. The next and almost last question left me a bit perplexed because someone decided to explain to me what I should have asked in my form. I saw this as a passive-aggressive behavior and an attempt to overstep my authority on my own panel, not considering why I asked that specific question and for what reasons. I made a very petty and passive-aggressive post on Twitter after I read this the first time, and I shouldn't. I didn't delete it as a reminder to try to do better the next time, but let's read it. If the point is to question ourselves about how to create a better fandom, maybe the approach, besides asking people to share unpleasant experience, it would be helpful to add a question about how people think we can build a safer spaces. Fandom is a very broad thing, and not all the people you share an interest with can be considered a friend or someone apt to discuss all the things you would want to address about problematic depiction of something, is certain show, movie, books, or any other media. It is certainly true. There will be bigots, rude people, and whatnot in every fandom. It is not something that can be avoided, unfortunately. I think a way to create a better fandom can be learning when to distance ourselves from certain spaces and discussion, especially if they happen online. Also, we need to know how to curate the spaces we spend time at, virtual or not. Another thing would be not being defensive all the time, and admitting text-based communication can be hard sometimes without tone indicators or very explicit parameters for all the participants of a conversation. And also, I think understanding that the fact that we want to discuss something at some point with some people doesn't mean they want to do it in that exact moment, and it's okay. It is important to respect people's boundaries, even if we're passionate about something. We don't know people's context, they don't owe us any explanation or justification of why they don't want to engage in a certain exchange. Finally, I consider the most important thing is empathy, and knowing that not all people in fandom are equal. Not all people are tolerant or want to change for the better. I know some of us want a better fandom and a better world, but a few people cannot change everything. We must know when that's the case and choose our battles. I think, but maybe I'm wrong. The part of this message was boosted after a discussion I had on Discord. Something I will not discuss here in detail, but gave me a lot to think about. Boundaries and helped me to shape better my consciousness about them. Choosing who we want to engage online is very important, but it's not bulletproof. What our friend described is a win-win, everybody lose kind of situation. You are telling us that the way to create a better fandom is to be tolerant and empathetic, show respect, but also create boundaries, select the space and the people to interact. Do not engage in discussion that can upset us, and choose our battles. You are not describing an healthy fandom, you are describing a microcosmos, a bubble, a limited space that works as a personal way to experience the fandom, not to improve the fandom itself. Before going any further, I need to remind you all that I'm talking about situation outside this specific space. They can have a code of conduct, and one of the rules say, please be aware that conduct that is not intended as a harassment could be received as such. What one person sees as a friendly debate or mutually enjoyable joke might be unwelcome to the recipient. If asked to stop what you are doing, you must respect that request and disengage. If the conduct persists when the target has asked for it to cease, it becomes harassment regardless to the intention. I totally agree with this rule. even if I always prefer to analyze every situation as its own, considering the context, but the respect of boundaries and of the rules is not optional, especially in a space like the con itself. So I want to specify that I do not want to imply that we must accept toxic behavior, rude people, bigots, etc. But at the same time, I would really like to be able to agree to disagree about things, even passionately, without being afraid of being blocked forever or attacked relentlessly from the person I'm talking to and their entire friend list. This is what is happening more and more often, and the only possible outcome of such habits is to disaggregate the fandom in a vast number of micro-communities that have no connection between each others. I absolutely agree with our friends' observation. They are all very on point, and please consider using them to improve your personal experience inside any fandom or online space. But the purpose of this panel is to find some useful act to interact in a bigger environment. Avoid toxicity is obviously impossible, but what I perceived in many occasions is that any bit of disagreement could lead to passive-aggressive behavior, personal attack, invalidation, mockery, and very often the refusal to admit that maybe we were wrong, just because of a perfectly understandable lack of knowledge, because we are scared to be bad, when not knowing something doesn't imply bad, just the necessity to stop and listen. I recently had an experience on Twitter about something I'm very into, collectionism, that left me a bit perplexed. I know I will end up being super annoying, but don't perceive me telling this story as a personal attack against anyone. I need to provide an example about what I'm trying to point out. And I am not mad at anyone, because discussions online are absolutely normal and misunderstanding, and I am not judging anyone. Someone posted an horrified tweet about an auction selling the flyer of the latest stage performance of Michael Sheen under the Milkwood. Some people answered the tweet defined this action as shame because the flyer was something given for free if you went to the theater. I objected that the theater programs are the subject of a very extended collectionism phenomena, that people who collect these items are usually very happy to find them purchasable, especially if a favorite actor or play is involved. And judging the person who put the action online was unfair, first because the base price was very low. Second, because probably many collectors would be very happy to find it online, especially in this moment of history when traveling is very difficult, so it is unlikely to have the chance to grab the program personally. Let me add that for these reasons, plus the fact that maybe you need the theater ticket to be able to come into possession of this item, or you had to go physically to the place, and both these things are technically not free. The item itself needed an economic effort to be acquired. So sell it is not an act of smuggling, nor it's against the law. If I own an object and I acquire it legally, I am free to sell it, and people are free not to buy it. I try to explain in more than one answer to the tweet that collectionists are grateful for the chance to purchase such things, and instead of something along, oh, I didn't know that, I've been answered in a passive-aggressive tone, first with something like, I am free to have an opinion, and yes, of course, you are. But if you are judging badly something you didn't know, that is not an opinion, and it could be perceived as offensive. In the last stand, the entire ordeal was reduced to difficulty of communication because of a language gap. So basically it sounded like they were saying to me I was incapable of understanding them because I wasn't skilled enough. This sounds rude, and I would like to address people that speak English as their first language to avoid this kind of comments, especially if it's a way to escape from an uncomfortable argument. A lot of people that have learned your language have a huge trigger when it comes to their ability to express themselves properly. Like one of my closest friends didn't speak English out loud because she has been bullied about her accent and pronunciation when she was young. It is also more kind, or if you prefer polite, try to understand what the person you are talking really meant. On a side note, I would like to point out that some common saying in various languages could translate literally in English with something that could sound very rude or inappropriate. But it's just a translation problem. From Italian to English, there is a funny list of words you need to learn by heart called false friend. That is composed of words that sound like Italian ones but mean something else, like eventually and eventualmente, that means possibly, or orzo, that means bear, and not horse, that translate with cavallo. So the point is, if someone took the time to explain something you are not aware about, maybe the purpose is only to expand your knowledge, not to humiliate or diminish you. Listen, especially in an international fandom, is one of the most important acts we use to build a better fandom, to reinforce connection, to look to a farther in the landscape instead of retreat in a small, self-reassuring bubble, at least while we decide to interact on social without some pre-settled boundaries. The latest answer left of my form is not something I can read. The person asked me specifically to not to do so, but I can address the problem without making clear reference. The story this person told me is absolutely disgraceful. Not the worst I heard in my life, because fandom is magic, but for sure is something that should and must be avoided if we want to call ourselves a good fandom. The story is quite long and involves bullying and harassment. I cannot know if the story is completely reliable, cause I haven't had the chance to witness any of the event, nor to ask for a clarification to protect the safety and the privacy of the person that wrote to me. Apparently, this person ends up attacked on a very personal level for futile reason. People block them, the harassers spread false voices about them, and even asked their friend to collect as much personal data as possible about the alleged victim to try to kick them out of the fandom. The result has been, of course, a retreat of the attacked person from community spaces, socials, and the loss of affection towards the fandom. Now, I want to say this again. I cannot know how much of this story is true. What I need to say is that it's not a new story. In my 20 years in fandoms, I faced similar behaviors many times. If not me, it happened to friends of mine or their friends. What I urge to say is, no matter what a person could do to upset you, there are very few reasons to attack someone and chase them into their real life. There are very few reasons that allow ostracism and spreading of rumors without the intent to turn a large number of people against one. This behavior must be avoided at any cost, and if someone in your inner circle asks you to team with them to do so, you should be the first to try and stop this from the start. No matter if it's a friend that is asking you a favor, harass and attack people for reasons that are not eligible as self-defense, going against racism, phobia, etc. are not acceptable. This sort of mass hysteria is one of the main problems of being into a large group of people that share something. The group felt powerful and acted as everything born from a common knowledge is the absolute truth. There is not such thing as the absolute truth in this world. Context is what could help us to understand if something is more towards the good or the bad side, but rarely something is absolutely right or wrong. One of the first events that led me to the idea of this panel is something that on a certain level includes all the topics I discussed till now. It has been years now since this happened, and I must say I wasn't able to enjoy the fandom like I used to be because of it. But despite that, I'm still here because I really believe we have something good. When the second season stage was announced, someone wrote a tweet complaining about the series, calling it self-indulgent and not interesting. You know, this is simply a personal opinion, and even if you don't agree with that, it is valid and is not offensive. I knew several Good Omens fans that didn't like Stage, but avoided telling me it publicly to not be victim of something similar to what happened after this comment. Michael Sheen read the tweet, and he was probably already upset that day. How do I know he was upset? He complained about a journalist calling him with the wrong name just an hour before. And if you are a Michael fan, you know that he hates when people forget his name. Anyway, he went a bit further and answered the lady, retweeting her first big mistake, saying that maybe they could ask the authorities to cancel it and made a petition. He then proceeded to create the petition for real, using almost the exact tweet from this woman and even using her first name. Thousands of fans found it hilarious and absolutely correct form of reaction to a criticism. Guess what? It was not. First of all, retweeting that comment put this person in the direct fire of all Michael's followers, that are a huge number of people. Creating the petition using the word from the tweet puts her in jeopardy on a second level, because all you needed to find her was to copy and paste the text on Google. This behavior exposed her to the mockery of hundreds of thousands of individuals. And the outcome could have been tragic, even if the 90% of Michael fans were just laughing at that. And by the way, this is a form of bullying. He fed air to a lot of alleged trolls, maniac, unstable people, and whatever lived on the internet. I bet you can imagine what I am referring to. Now, you are thinking I am mad with him, and I am partially am. Because he used his power in the media, exposing someone that just expressed a random opinion without thinking about the risk. He had a great power, and as Uncle Ben said, with great power came great responsibilities. Also, he did something similar a few months after. But the thing that upset me the most is that this so-called amazing fandom, they praise themselves as inclusive, not toxic, and that refuse any kind of bullying, for the most part didn't say a word to stop it, and otherwise gave credit and justified the mockery, laughing at this person that had the audacity to express a personal opinion. Although it seemed that nothing tragic happened, even if one person decided to DM this lady to mock or harass her for a simple opinion, that would have been one message too much. I personally called out Mr. Shin for 24 hours, ended up being blocked by him and by some other friends. I have no problem with that, but it saddened me. And what makes this even more painful is that more than one person contacted me in private to express support to what I was trying to do, telling me very openly that they did feel the same, but they were afraid to speak out loud because of the possible backfire from the other fans. This is when I started to think this fandom was not as good as it believed to be, and why I decided to expose myself one more time. I am here to call you out, to ask you all to think twice before typing an answer, before judging something you are not familiar with, before criticizing someone that grew up in a country you didn't know nothing about, before ignoring, silencing, and invalidating others. In my first fandom, Star Trek, the one I consider my family, we use a motto that comes from the Vulcans. It says, infinity diversity in infinity combination. I think this can resume what I tried to say for the past 50 minutes or so. Be respectful, not because you have to, but because you want to. Or if you prefer, be kind. Be kind not only with the people you like, be kind when your first impression of someone is bad, because you can't be surprised of how many times someone you judge harshly at the first glance could turn into a very special friend. And at the same time, don't be blind if a so-called friend, mutual, or people you admire fail, and even in this eventuality, stay open-minded. Bad days happen, shit happens, the visit of the Archangel Gabriel happens, and a mood doesn't define a person, just a moment in this person's life. I'm going to close this begging you one more time to avoid speculation, not to spread rumors about it, not to want people you think are involved in the stories. I told you to respect boundaries, and at the same time to be more open-minded and available to listen and learn. I would like this to be the key message from my panel. And about the learning, please never take for sure the knowledge acquired by a limited source or from one single person. Before shape your opinion, collect as much data as you can. Ask questions politely. Make your research using reliable sources and not random blog or Tumblr. And among all of this, don't harass justifying it as I am helping a friend defending a popular persona. because no matter how you do it, harassment is never good. I hope someone would like to join me in the Don't chat. I'm available for the entire day. Enjoy the con, enjoy your passion, and be kind. Bye bye. Ciao.